If you're caring for aging parents, you need Parent Projects Connect. Here's why. First, you get access to a verified business network, so you're only working with the most trustworthy vendors who won't take advantage of your situation. Second, Parent Projects guides you through modules and tasks on health, financial, real estate, and medical decisions, so you're always prepared for what's next. Third, you can invite family members into your project so your family is in the know and working together. Get started with a free 30-day trial today at parentprojects.com.
Home is where the heart is. And over the course of this month, we've been talking about ways that you can break up some of those loggerheads or some of those opportunities where your family gets stuck. Today, we're going to transition into talking of how activities of daily living, which are used by the insurance industry, are ways that you can communicate and pull out real facts and the things that help you access things like your long-term healthcare insurance plans, but also how you communicate with other professionals in senior home care, in-home care, non-medical, medical, all the way down into senior living communities. Stay tuned for this. If you're looking for a way to break up and remind your loved one that home is where the heart is with some real facts, stick around.
You're listening to Parent Projects, a family media and technology group production. Now here's your host, Tony Siebers.
Welcome in, everybody. This week, home is where the heart is, and we are going to talk and utilize activities of daily living and have a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to introducing you. Kimberly Akers, certified senior advisor. She's an owner of our verified business networks in Phoenix, Amada Senior Care. And Kimberly, thanks for joining us today and digging in and helping us explore what started as an insurance industry kind of trend and has kind of turned into some way that we can have conversations with our family members. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Thanks so much, Tony. I appreciate you having me.
So, Kimberly, let's back into you have an organization who works with in-home care and handles that advocacy, that long-term advocacy. You yourself, especially being a certified senior advisor, just speaks to the amount of time that you've spent and dedicated to your craft of understanding end-of-life issues or even just aging issues as a family. How did you come into this being something you had so much passion about?
Well, thank you for asking. And we all know sometimes things aren't linear, right? It's not from point A to point B, Tony. So I was a former educator. I actually taught 8th grade math and science for about 18 years. And I just love educating people because I do feel the more you know, the more you can help. Well, and as obviously my life, started journeying on, I have aging parents and discovered that there is a whole set of people that are just like me, adult children that need to be educated. There is no book that just says, how do we help really guide and embrace and enrich this journey that our parents are going on. And so I got into the industry after being a teacher, but honestly, I also grew up watching my dad as an insurance agent. So I really understand the ins and outs of what the insurances are looking at as far as activities of daily living. So kind of all melded together into a senior care.
Well, I love the educator approach in a background, right? Because this is truly, it's an education. It is literally, I think every time I start getting into it, in the back of my head, I can hear this. Okay, buckle up, Buttercup. Like there is a lot. Someone else is called it drinking from a fire hose.
Oh, yes.
So much to come at you, but that's also really fascinating that insurance was seeing that kind of growing up and maybe hearing those conversations
Mhm.
in your formative years would kind of help inform things because it seems like access to capital or dealing with the financial costs become one of the first kind of major push points or drivers that get family members to kind of start stepping in, right? There's some major expense, and maybe mom and dad can afford it, but maybe it's time for them to utilize that insurance policy that they bought, in 85, and they're not quite sure exactly how that turns on or it's slow to turn on, and
Or
you just
just the definitions, you're right.
right.
Just the definitions of the ADLs that we'll talk about.
Right. And we laugh a lot too, because I think part of that journey and understanding your parents is, I'll speak for myself off of this, but there's this thought when I was younger, I just thought that one day I would just know what all this was about. I would just wake up and the Social Security fairy would sprinkle dust, what that looks like, and I'd understand Medicaid and Medicare and where all those things were going to come around and what long-term care, like you just it really is something that you tend to learn by watching a family member go through it. Man, some cultures they do it with grandparents, and actually, I really like that. The more we see, we have a great melting pot. The more I see young people, like millennials, even today, they get involved with their grandparents. The more I really Man, I think that there's really something in that. Some cultures are awesome about it, and I think others would do really, really well to pick some level of that up.
Right.
But, is that anything you've seen as you've kinda come across, or when families get involved, is it usually one specific generation, or do you ever see younger families get involved in this?
So, and from my perspective, in our country, and I think that's just it. And we are in Arizona. I know this is,
Right.
projected nationally, but in Arizona, we have so many people that just retired here from back east or in the Midwest, right? So their families are still over there, which are
Yeah.
grandchildren and things of that nature. So I don't see it as much here, but I can tell you that my family has been living, we call it intergenerationally, for 10 years. So we have had my parents, um, my husband and I, and our children. So we have all the way from 28 to 11 years old that kind of just have been doing life together with everyone.
Yeah. Well, and that also, especially as we start talking then to activities of daily living, which we're going to go through today specifically, they're not uncommon to the same kind of things you even look at with your children to understand and assess their capability of being independent.
Totally.
Hopefully able to do that by the time we get them out of the nest, right? And get them moving. But and they're two very different. I don't what I don't want to do is be wrong to think that we're just equating that end of life is like being a child, 'cause it's not.
It's
But it is even in raising young people today, as a parent of five and from 7 up to 22, I've learned that it's about assessing and giving them opportunities to practice their autonomy in every possible way I
Mhm.
possibly can. I try to let them make that, and I give them a safe place to make mistakes against that and give grace against those things. And the more I can do that with my parents and my grandparents when I was dealing with my grandparents, the better that communication, the better that relationship tended to go, when we saw that. Activities of daily living just happen to be a couple of insurance terms that also help us maybe gauge that, what's working and what's not, yeah?
It does. It helps us to
Mm.
gauge and just start having some conversations that are more factual instead of emotional.
Yeah,
And I think that that's where a lot of adult children can maybe just start the conversation is 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 centering around these activities of daily living. And the more that we just get comfortable with conversing with our parents about that, it's just going to become second nature, right? Same with our children, right? When we start talking to them about, certain issues and growing up, if we're hesitant on talking about it, and we try to stay away from it, it's always going to be just uncomfortable. But if we continue to just get comfortable with being uncomfortable initially, it can be a really great conversation and help take the emotion out of it.
Yeah. Well, in data and facts, man, it can do so much to help here. It can take some of that. It can give you a reprieve. Emotion. And I talk with whether I'm talking to my kids or we're working with other families. It's always okay to feel the way that you feel.
Def-
How you make decisions, you got to learn and develop. We hopefully we learn throughout our lives and how to check that for a moment against reality and what the situation really is, so we don't go charging in on too many assumptions, and especially a bad assumption, which might actually make things more difficult for us. But to do that check, you got to have facts, you got to have your information, it's got to be kind of collected. So great. I want to dive into when we're going to take our first break here, but when we come back, I'd really like to dive into that. The ADLs flat out. Let's break them down. What are those major pieces? And for those of you that are following along at home, if you want to put up onto another browser, parentprojects.com/ADL. That's parentprojects.com/ADL. That will get you the link off where we're going to begin that conversation. You can kind of follow along to be able to see some of that. But we'll be back in right after this break from one of our sponsors with Zoho, with Kimberly Akers of Amada Home Care, where home is where the heart is.
Introducing Zoho One. Zoho One gives you a unified suite of business and productivity applications to manage your sales, marketing, customer support, HR, finance and operations, custom solutions, and more. All the business applications in Zoho One are fully integrated. With a unified app suite like Zoho One that seamlessly connects your marketing and sales, you can now measure the effectiveness of your marketing campaigns based on the leads and deals it generates. You can also connect sales with your inventory management system to update stock counts. Likewise, you can streamline your invoices by integrating your sales and accounting, automate sourcing, tracking, and hiring to recruit the best talent and build great teams. When your business runs on one unified suite of apps, silos dissolve and insightful strategies emerge. When apps work together, your business runs better. Zoho One, the operating system for business.
And welcome back. This week we're discussing, or this month really, home is where the heart is. And this week we're talking about activities of daily living with Kimberly Akers of Amada Home Care in the Phoenix Verified Business Network, located in Phoenix, Arizona. Kimberly, again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Tony.
So, a lot of our audience are, quite often that profile is 50 to 65. It is a working mother. She's balancing running some level of, usually a company of some kind, or working as an exec. They work for a full, really has their own career. They're balancing that. They've got kids, maybe in college, maybe still in high school, really late side of that. And mom and dad are needing more and more help. They're understanding the creep of that as it's coming in. And finding those opportunities to push in can be really, really difficult. We have found in industry, and we being, I think, both of our businesses and the other businesses we work with, that activities of daily living is a set of activities that you can begin those conversations around, right? Can you make maybe an early introduction to us on activities of daily living and what it means for you guys?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm so passionate about helping seniors stay at home and families stay at home. I do believe that that's just where we are just more enriched, right? We just feel comfortable, loved, secured at home. And so let's talk about those activities of daily living. Tony, what I'd like to do is first name those activities of daily living. And then if we can, with a conversation, kind of dive deeper into them, of the definitions and kind of how that maybe we can look at it with our parents. And so again, these 6 activities of daily living, many of the hospital system, the medical organizations, as well as the long-term care insurance organizations, or veterans benefits, really kind of work off these activities of daily living. And so I am going to, let me see. I think your first one, I can't see the whole screen, Tony, but I know that one of the first ones is transferring. And so transferring is, we'll go into that in detail a little bit later, but a second one is dressing.
Yeah.
Third is bathing or showering. Fourth is toileting. Fifth is incontinence. And sixth is eating. And so, let me know, can we dive deep into those? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great. In the article that I've been able to throw up here, and just in case they're following along from home, again, it's at parentprojects.com/ADL. We've got the exact same, by the way, because this is what they are if you're looking out there. So feeding oneself, one of the first ones.
Yeah.
Seems somewhat self-explanatory, but what are you looking for? What is that assessment?
Yeah. So many times people will misinterpret this. So let's make that clear. Is feeding oneself doesn't always mean meal preparation. I wish it did, and that is definitely something that needs to be addressed. But it's actually being able to take a utensil or something and being able to get food into our mouth after it's been placed. I see this a lot when some of our patients have been maybe diagnosed with Parkinson's. There's a lot of
Right.
essential tremors with that. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to get, food into the mouth. Sometimes with a stroke, there's an issue. Again, one side has been impacted, and it's hard to kind of navigate that. Many times with arthritis, even if you've really have an extreme rheumatoid arthritis or a really hard arthritis, sometimes that dexterity, being able to hold a utensil, it becomes quite complicated and overwhelming. When those kinds of things are happening, then what happens is it's a domino effect, Tony, and then there becomes
Yeah.
just a lack of nutrition, right? I think
Sure.
you and I, like, sometimes I just get frustrated with something and you're like, forget it, right?
Yep.
And so we see that in those that are growing older that have that difficulty, and then it just becomes a lack of nutrition and also hydration, because again, being able to take a cup and get that hydration that we need.
Right. Yeah, manipulating bottles,
Oh,
things like
yes.
that. So, another interesting thing you brought up too is, and oftentimes stroke, that it could present at one level and it could resolve. That can kind of as these ADLs come in, for instance, feedings oneself might be something that becomes a problem for a period of time and then resolves from a period of time, right?
Right.
It's not. This isn't all, again, it's not linear. Few things in any of this is linear.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so understanding that, and I think when you think about it that way, and sometimes even presenting that, in my own family where we've had a family member who's had stroke, there were things that got difficult immediately after that, and being able to talk to that being a difficulty in time, and then watching that resolve, and everybody being understanding up front about just the facts of that. This is what happens at this particular stage of this.
Mhm.
We'll look to see this subside, and for this to come back, we need to get this back. It took the pressure off of us, like, judging. You can't do
Right.
this, right?
Right.
It gave something there. Any talking points if you're noticing somebody who's having a difficult time feeding themselves, any talking points or something through that, or tips that families can be thinking about while they're putting this together?
Well, I think you mentioned something really powerful, is not judging, right? And
Yeah.
and not judging, and kind of walking that journey with them. It might be trying, everything's a trial and error. Like what works for one person might not work for another. So it might be having some modified utensils, modified cups that are a little bit easier to hold and manage. Um,
Yeah.
it might be having foods that don't require utensils, right? That it's easier to maybe
Yeah.
manipulate with something that isn't an easier finger food.
Sure, sure. And preparation of that
Yes.
food too, making sure it's foods that are easier to
Yep.
prepare. I know in many cases one of the ones we'll hear if mom dies and dad's left is in this generation dad hasn't made a meal for himself. And there is a period of time where they are trying to make sure that dad's not just eating hot dogs, you know, every day for the
Mhm.
first couple of weeks before somebody figured it out, and they're trying to make some adjustment to that. And dad can learn those things, but addressing and working through this sometimes can be just your background, like education. It can be about education and teaching them how to work through that thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I love that. So moving on, number two, bathing and cleansing one's body. What are we looking for in bathing?
Yeah. Well, some of the things that I look for, and I began asking to get some facts, and you might have to dive deep, is, how often do you take a shower? How often do you bathe? As we become older, many times that's where all the falls happen, is in the
Right,
shower,
right.
out of the shower, around, during kind of that time period. And if there
Yeah,
has been a fall surrounding that shower, many of us are really hesitant about getting in again.
right. A
There's a
trauma.
fear, and it's an understandable fear, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Um, they were lucky that time that nothing was broken, but, it might be that there's just this fear, and so they start to decrease their personal hygiene. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the things to look out for. Maybe start asking, maybe if you're an adult daughter, just, maybe start kind of looking at the clues, looking at, how often are there wet towels if you're over there, that kind of thing. Um, but that's kind of a time that to just really have some facts. Now, Tony, the thing what I like to impress upon people is that sometimes they feel that, oh, well, if I need help in the shower, that means somebody's going to have my hands all over, their hands all over me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I try to say, "No, that's not it." Many times you can be very independent in a shower. It just is helpful to have somebody turning it on for you, making sure the temperature is well, or at a good temperature. Just making sure that that there's safety mats down, and that when you get out of the shower, sometimes it's making sure that there's a seat available to sit down and dry off your upper and
Yeah.
lower extremities. It really doesn't mean somebody's just hands all over.
Yeah, I've heard some great early interventions on this for families have been, um, one has been just being present at the time in
Yeah.
which, and part of their visitation routine was present so that they could just walk through the bathroom, make sure that the clothes were up off of the ground because sometimes bending over gets difficult, and so
Yes.
things can get cluttered down low. Taking things, if you notice there's a lot of clutter down below, the knee level or lower, that might indicate they're having a hard time getting low. Bring those things up to them, the soaps where the extra toilet paper is stored, where those things,
Right.
like where is all of that up? Is it accessible for what they're capable of going to keep that autonomy? And then in that time planning, I've heard people talk about, well, that's when I go to mom's and I start the shower, and then I'm just right outside the door. And so she knows I'm just out here and I can hear if she's gonna,
Right.
that just brings some level of comfort. Grab bars to understand too.
Mhm.
It opens up these opportunities. Oh, would it be helpful if we had? What if we had a handle here, a professional handle that was done, and making sure that those, by the way, are installed professionally and done well, so they don't rip out of the wall and really cause an injury or cause them to rely on something that then fails because it wasn't done properly,
Ag-
and then they won't trust that thing again, right?
Agreed. Agreed. I also like the handheld shower heads that
Yeah,
can be
yeah,
taken down, and used, as well as a shower chair. So those are all wonderful,
yeah,
uh, m- you know, really slight modifications, right?
right.
That can be easily made. Um, if I could add just one thing, if they have like a
Mhm.
glass shower, the sliding shower,
But yeah,
um, one of my things is, maybe try to get rid of that, and And because a lot of times people will try to hold on to that because it does have a little railing.
hand
It's not
that
a,
you've heard. It's not even a handle. It's a towel
it's
holder.
a
It's a towel
towel
rack.
holder.
The towel rack. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I know, just try to just get that and get the old
Yeah.
fashioned shower curtain all over again.
And those are actually, that's a great one. Looking at how high they have to step
Right.
to be able to get in and out of the shower, and being able to relieve those little modifications go a long way of keeping them independent against that. And then you can kind of ramp that up. And if you're not able, if it gets to the point to where somebody's got to be there and you can't, now you're starting to know where you're going to need a push in of help
Right.
against some of those. Awesome. Love that one. Getting dressed. Let's go that next step there, getting dressed by themselves.
Yeah.
What are we looking for in here?
So getting dressed, this is where again people think, okay, I need to be totally kind of, you know, bed bound or something of that, and somebody's got to fully dress me. No, let's kind of rethink that. I think a lot of seniors are prescribed compression socks,
Mm,
but they don't utilize them because
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
hard.
They're
It's
hard.
difficult. Yeah.
They are hard. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that can constitute as dressing. I recently met a lady the other day, and due to arthritis and shoulder surgeries that she's had in the past, she has a difficult time lifting her arms just even above her like shoulders. And so getting on a jacket or some clothes are just a little difficult. So maybe having somebody hold, that. Um, Sometimes we have just difficulties with either the upper, the lower extremities, or even getting on shoes. So just
Right.
starting to look at those little things and not thinking it has to be the whole package, right? Like it doesn't have to be everything.
Totally. And knowing too ebbs and flows of that, an injury, a shoulder
Oh,
injury
yes.
could take longer to heal, and that could cause some of these things. So look at that when you see those little things come up, start think this again can present some time where maybe you can push in while they're in that recovery stage. This would address itself and come back down. But now you've got something factual you can go to them with. Like, oh, well, you've hurt your shoulder off of that. I can just be here and time our time to do that, or we can have somebody that at that time to make sure you're able to manipulate or to do those things. Orthopedic shoes is another one,
Yep.
especially if they're having other challenges or they get into where they have to, they're they can't bend down as easy. Maybe especially if there's been a lot of weight gain or other
Mhm.
things. There can be a lot of help as they get older. They're going to need help in these types of things, maybe sooner than later. But I love that it's not. Actually, I'm not going to say it's not. I love that you point out that there really is a bona fide concern sometimes about your privacy. It's the space of somebody coming in. Most of these things in ADLs, they're very intimate things.
Personal. Mhm.
They're personal. There are times at which you're very vulnerable
Right.
in the time where you're doing that particular thing. So there's going to be some emotion when it comes from that, and it makes a lot of sense to give space for that emotion. Try not to feed into that beast and try to look more to just the practical
Mhm.
standpoints. Um, okay, so mobility, walking, mechanical assistance, transferring, moving one place to the other. Talk to us about what that is. What are we looking for in mobility?
Right. Well, we're looking, first of all, if they've had any recent falls, you want to
Mhm.
start looking at that and, maybe getting some therapy, maybe some balance issues are off or something of that nature. But really, mobility is being able to transfer or get in and out of a chair or a bed safely. So, again, looking at kind of how that is going is really helpful for the adult children, or looking at your parents in that essence. What I did want to point out though, Tony, is that sometimes when we have a diagnosis of a disease, so let's just talk about like maybe COPD or CHF. Many times these ADLs, while we can do them like mobility,
Yeah.
showering, dressing, we become quickly out of breath and tired. And so when we're trying to exert ourselves with a limited amount of energy, it might create issues later on, like falls or something like that, right? Like
Sure.
if
Yeah.
somebody's
Because fatigue sets in during the course of the day. That's not even just an age thing. That's just a people thing, right?
right,
Right.
exactly, exactly. And
Yeah.
so, that's where looking at these things, and while maybe somebody can do it, it's just taking a lot of energy to do that.
Yeah, and you know what I also would like about that would make sure we stress is, can they do that prolonged at different times of the day? Can they do that at night when they need to, as well as they can in the morning, and throughout different periods of the day, or are there gaps in those areas that could help inform when's a good time to push in or to provide push in assistance to
Right.
them, and give you a more accurate. So when you look at these, don't just pick a fix the best time. Make sure that you're really looking across the board in doing that. Hey, talk to us about the use of do vehicles come into mobility? Common question that families will ask about. Where does that mom can't drive anymore off of that? Dad can't drive anymore. What is that? Is that part of mobility? Does it work within that? They can't get themselves around or not, or how does that work?
So that's not part of an activity of daily living, believe it or not. It's basically being able to get from, you know, in your house, basically. So that
Right.
mobility, but that is a hard conversation about the independence with vehicles. And there are many strategies. It's a hard conversation.
I would say, and I appreciate that clarification. If they have the ability to get in and out of vehicles without assistant,
Right.
right, and safely move, can they move from a vehicle to inside the home,
Inside the
or
home.
from the home
Right.
outside back into that? Right. These are things that will open up opportunities of maybe improvements of ramps, or
Exactly.
which you don't think is going to be as emotional an issue until you start having a conversation about a ramp, and the just that projection of the challenge. I think sometimes can be something you should be prepared for,
And
and
looking
just
at the
don't do.
size of the vehicle or the height of the
Right.
vehicle, I
Yeah.
love when people have kind of prepared and started buying vehicles that are a little bit, that's easier to kind of get into instead of the lower vehicle or a higher
Yeah.
vehicle. Um, and there's a lot of assistive devices in vehicles that you can install certain um, grab assistive devices in a vehicle besides
Right.
the normal manufacturer settings in there.
And I think that makes, yeah, be cautious. This I would say also, if vehicle is a part, and I don't want to get distracted too much, but from the mobility standpoint of transferring in and out of a vehicle, that is kind of a touch point where we worry about and start thinking about.
Right.
Tall vehicles become an obvious one. One that really surprised me to hear a lot was minivans. You think of, wow, a minivan's going to be so much easier, that sliding door, and there's plenty of space to work through. But sliding within that door and getting over to that seat it is actually, it takes effort. It's usually our kids that are doing it. I
I have
don't
a
think we
difficult
do it. Yeah, yeah. So that's something to think about as well. There's some great reports that sit out there. We don't plug any one vehicle over another. Uh, I'm not qualified to do that. I do know some vehicles we found that we really like. We like the Ford Escapes, and that size of vehicle is really seems to work well. The GMC, the smaller GMCs, the Envoys, the
Yeah.
Arcadias, the things like that.
How funny, I
They
was just about to say, I don't know if we could give a plug, but like, those mini SUVs, that's kind of
they are,
seems
yeah,
like, is really helpful, they're
right. That
size.
the seat is closer to the door. You can generally turn at their height. They can generally turn when you start thinking about, if you've ever been in and out of a bed or working from that, or you ever been hurt. You think about how that turns, how that transfers in. Can you simply turn with your back to the seat and sit back on it and be able to hit the seat? Or if when you go to hit and the seat's cut back another 3 inches, that might be something to think about. Or they have to step up to get that, and now kind of crunched. Anyhow, I won't digress too much further.
Yeah.
Hey, we're gonna take one more commercial break here, and we're gonna come back. We're gonna talk the last two keys: personal hygiene, and probably one of the most difficult when we get in with using the toilet and
Mhm.
toileting. A very personal side of that. So stay tuned. We are talking through activities of daily living with Kimberly Akers of Amada Senior Care. Join us and stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Joyce Petrowski, founder of R.O.S.E Resources Outreach to Safeguard the Elderly. I have a very serious question to ask you. What is the significance of $1.7 billion? This is the amount the 60-plus population in the United States lost to frauds and scams during 2021. The 60-plus population in Arizona lost about $54 million to these frauds and scams in 2021. R.O.S.E was founded in 2021 in Phoenix, Arizona. Our mission is to prevent the financial exploitation and defrauding of the elderly through advocacy and education. Our vision is retirement should be the best years of your life. It should be protected at all costs. Our goal is to reduce the number of victims and monetary loss. R.O.S.E is leading the way with effective, concise, and face-to-face educational programs for the elderly and their families, so they will become more aware of the frauds and scams and have tips and tools to help them not fall victim to these frauds and scams. We have a lot of valuable information on our website, www.roseadvocacy.org.
And welcome back, everybody. That was R.O.S.E, which is an advocacy group that we just absolutely adore. They do a lot of great work here in the Phoenix market, but they also push that information out across the board for other families. If you are looking for more information on some of those scam dangers or other things happening, we highly recommend them. You can find more information about them on parentprojects.com in our resources section. And, let's get back into pick up on our conversation here today. We've been talking about that home is where the heart is over this month. Specifically, Kimberly Akers with Amada is helping us understand those activities of daily living and the influence of those and how we can gather some facts and start finding some factual ways to talk with our family members about it. Kimberly, again, thanks for joining us in the show today.
Thanks so much. So let's, if that's okay, Tony, let's dive into some of the others that sometimes are kind of uncomfortable to talk about.
Oh, personal and uncomfortable. Okay,
Yes.
personal hygiene. We kind of touched a little bit of the bathing side, but the details of this in personal hygiene. I mean,
Yeah.
when you get older, things just you note that you'll go into a lot of places. Things can you have different scents and different feelings of things around that. What is normal? What kind of comes with age, and then what are you looking for as part of an ADL?
Yeah. So we're looking at, if that's okay, let's go ahead and move to toileting. We've talked about some of those others, if that's okay. I'm just gonna go right in.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna look, and you really want to look at facts, but also really be proactive. And I think this is going to be one of my soapbox, and it's just because I am a woman, Tony. Most elderly women, we are prone to urinary tract infections.
Mhm.
And that just is terrible, and it's actually preventable, because what happens is we just are not doing a good job as we grow older with personal hygiene in that area. And so bacteria really builds up. I'm not sure if anybody knows, but usually when I get a call from an adult daughter that says, you know what, I know mom is showing signs of cognitive impairment, but in the last 2 weeks, it has just been unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, it is not. And I usually say, and again, I'm not a medical professional, but I usually say, please go and get her a urinary analysis. most likely it's a urinary tract infection. And so,
Yeah.
what I would love to impress upon adult children is that urinary tract infections in the older generation, um, they manifest themselves in behaviors and in cognition, a decrease in cognition. It's not what we normally would have thought as a urinary tract infection when we were younger girls, but it manifests itself. It comes out as symptoms, as maybe exasperated behaviors, maybe mom's a little bit more off, a really decrease in cognition. So get a urinary analysis. So that's my soapbox. Sorry.
No, it's a real good one. And just as we talked with some of the other issues, there's a totality of circumstances here. So if you've got a loved one who's having a difficult time with water intake,
Yeah.
right? Or they're on a new medication that starts changing that balance, or the from pH balance to just generally, again, the food or the nutrient intake or what they're eating or how that's eating. There becomes that will change the cycles at which they might be used to
Yes.
using the restroom or toileting, or what they have to do in personal hygiene, right? The same way that foods impact us different, foods and stress and lifestyle impacts you just as much, and if not even more so as you get older. And I love that you've identified one of the big ways we really can start seeing that when we get older is in our behaviors
Yes.
and where that is. And so I think you're just right on it. You're right on it. So if you're seeing what are things, if they're having difficulties with something like that, any low hanging fruit, early push in stuff, or things that you guys have could recommend or have seen that have been successful for families?
Well, a couple of things that I recommend, even, maybe there's not an issue, it's just a proactive approach. And I'll
Okay.
be honest, I'm probably one of the people I'm probably one of the few people, but start installing a bidet for mom and dad.
Yeah.
I love them because it does, again, I don't mean to be too blunt, but we are created. We all,
Right. Right.
but number one, installing a bidet, Costco, Sam's Club, you can, put it on the toilet. You're not having to take it all the way out, and it's not like the European ones that you have a separate one. But if you put a bidet on your toilet, it allows cleanliness. And then as we age, sometimes the range of motion, to use that personal hygiene
Absolutely.
becomes complicated. And again, Tony, I don't want to, but as women, if we don't have that range of motion, then we're wiping differently. I'll just be
Yeah.
honest.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yep.
Then can exasperate and cause UTIs. So anyway, bidet is doing that. But even before the bidet, what I would do is totally buy a higher toilet. They do now make higher toilets. I understand some people put an expander on toilets. I get that. Totally not my favorite if we can try to find some other things, but sometimes there's some heightened toilets that you can, and then installing some rails around the toilet so it's easier to get on and off. The
Yeah.
bidet as well. Some of the things that you're going to be looking for, though, as an adult child, you're starting to look at smells. And again, as we age, we can't smell as well as we used to. And
Yeah.
so we cannot smell our own, maybe elimination, leakage, or things like that. And we're not knowing that those kinds of things need to be changed, or we need to clean ourselves better. So those are some things that we can start kind of like looking out for. But what I've mentioned previously are just some great proactive measures, to start getting people used to those measures before it's really needed.
Yeah. I love the you say it bluntly, but no, I've got daughters, right, and a wife, and so I know there's an understanding, and we can pay a lot of attention to that. There's a time at which they might not be able to, so
Right.
keep an open ability to have those conversations. So I think as we've kind of rounded off from those ADLs, how one of the top questions, and I see we've got a question up here. talk to us about the insurance coverage. We opened up and we talked about a lot of that comes from the insurance standpoint, and they use ADLs in some way, shape, or form. What should we know about when we're utilizing this, not just as a fact to address mom and dad or other loved ones, but when we're talking about looking at their long-term care insurance policies or veterans benefits or other things that might work off of them?
So some of the things you'll want to look for is that there are a need for at least two. So most insurance companies or veterans benefits or anything else that you're applying for usually typically will say that there needs to be evidence that someone needs assistance, and it can either be standby or hands-on. So you'll need to get some clarification by the specific thing that you're applying for. So sometimes insurance companies, they will say it has to be hands-on, or
Okay.
other insurance companies will say it can either be hands-on to standby. So assistance. And so you'll want to look that your loved one needs help with at least two or more of those activities of daily living.
Okay.
At least two or more of those activities of daily living. Really having an expert in activating that long-term care insurance is very helpful. When Amada goes in, when we go in, we're really assessing and making sure that that person does meet the qualifications of two activities of daily living assistance before we start making a claim on the insurance. Because we just have a good understanding and we want it to be a successful claims process or application process
Yeah.
for that senior and their family. So it's really also just, again, understanding activities of daily living, that it doesn't always have to be, it's an all or nothing. We talked about the dressing. It could be that I just need help with putting on my shirt, but I can do all the other stuff myself.
Yeah.
And so that would constitute as needing assistance with dressing as an activity of daily living.
Okay. The the checklist that we've kind of gone through here, you guys utilize, you've got a checklist that's available, right? And you guys have something that kind of help get those conversations going with your loved ones and with your other family member, right?
We do. We do. I have what's called an activity of daily living assessment and an instrumental of daily living assessment, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But
Okay.
I give this to all the family members. So many times I'm sitting down and this is a first initial conversation, right? And it's an education. And let's talk about, let's assess our loved one from all of our viewpoints on how they're doing with these activities of daily living. And so what we're doing is we're taking a lot of the facts, and I'm in there and I'm usually mediating and asking, okay, so what do you see? Not just how you feel. What are you seeing? What are you witnessing in mom, with dressing,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
let's just
Yeah.
get to the facts. Now, Tony, the other side of that assessment is instrumentals of daily living, which are the things like the cooking, the cleaning, the meal preparation, the grocery shopping, managing the finances, and all of that. We can focus that on another time, but I'm glad that we focused on activities of daily living because that is a lot what the medical industry uses, the organizations, as well as the insurance and the veterans benefits.
Brilliant, brilliant. And it's an awesome teaser for the next opportunity that you and I get to sit down, which are these other great places to step in. But generally, as we walk through this, you've hit a couple of great points. First of all, understanding those 6 basic ADLs, finding ways that you can be proactive against those 6. So, go back and listen to this if you need to in the episode. We did a pretty good detail of what would be entailed from those, and threw out a couple of ideas to stay in front of that. Again, always early and often is what we talk about whenever you're starting to kick into this and you start those conversations. address and understand, or maybe we could say meet the emotional, but don't just stew in that and be in that, and don't put that back. Meet there, be there, let that happen, let the emotion involved with assessing these things kind of be, but move into the fact, look from the facts, understand it pragmatically, as much as maybe you could expect a doctor coming in to help with some of those things. Again, we're looking for about 2 of them, and to understand when we're making an assessment, is this something that they would need hands-on help with or standby assistance with? Maybe something that's important for their specific insurance policies or their entitlement program, which they might be signing up with. You talked about understanding those up front, and that you guys help families unfold those conversations. You're one way, and so home healthcare organizations, imagine across the board, and we've seen can help with that conversation. One gap that I might slide in, if I can, is if that insurance policy is really a challenge. You talked about using professionals to really help you with that. Understanding the language of that, or if you get tripped up into that, the use of a good healthcare advocate, this would be an ideal opportunity for them to be able to push in and just help figure that out. They know the ins and the outs. They know then what the insurance company kind of steers away from and where it might be, and how to help communicate most clearly, succinctly, and quickly, I think, to help you get that help. So I would put that out. If the home care company that you're working with in your market doesn't have that portion or capability with them, check out parentprojects.com. You can find some healthcare advocates that can assist you and help you with that. I guess that is kind of, I'm trying to think, is there anything that I missed on that, or as we wrap through it?
No, I think you covered it all. I just appreciate having this conversation and helping, I guess, my generation, help their parents age gracefully in their home. I'm so passionate about it. I also want my generation to be preserved, because I can see so many stressed out adult daughters, and there's a domino effect. Sometimes their marriages are under stress because of them taking care of their aging loved ones. And so, as much as we can be proactive and starting to have these conversations early and often with our parents, is really just going to benefit the whole family in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. And as you're going through this, if you're starting to struggle with anxiety or depression or other, it's a normal thing to go through. Processing this it's hard. We all do it by the grace of God. We've all had parents, and if you're lucky, you still do. And so there's a level of this you're dealing with that is it's part of that cycle for those. Being able to reach out, make sure you take care of yourself as you're going through this process. Be good to yourself from that. Be realistic with yourself on that. Engage other folks. You're not on your own. There are others here to help you. And today, Kimberly, I really appreciate you joining us and being that help for some families working their way through the ADLs.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you again for joining and for sharing just all of your time, talents, and treasures. God bless you.
Well, that's it for the team this week, and thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed the content, remember to subscribe and to share this episode on the app that you're using right now. Your reviews and your comments, they really help us expand our reach as well as our perspective. So if you have time, also drop us a note. Let us know how we're doing. For tips and tools to clarify your parent project, simplify communication with your stakeholders, and verify the professionals that you choose, you can find us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for trusting us. Until our next episode, behold and be held.
Thank you for listening to this Parent Projects podcast production. To access our show notes, resources, or forums, join us on your favorite social media platform or go to parentprojects.com. This show is for informational and educational purposes only. Before making any decisions, consult a professional credentialed in your local area. This show is copyrighted by Family Media and Technology Group Incorporated and Parent Projects LLC. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcast.